Welcome to question 25 of Prima Secunda of the Summa Theologia, and we are continuing in our treatise on evil habits, otherwise known as vice or sin. And now we get to the causes of sin. What causes us to sin? And just by way of introduction, I want to say that St. Thomas Aquinas, and really everybody that's ever lived, has always had a problem with reconciling a good God with evil in the world. How could it be that God allows this? If God is perfectly good, why didn't he just make a perfect world? And that's a whole topic in and of itself, which Thomas does address in another place in the Summa. But here, Thomas, as a very optimistic philosopher and theologian, is trying to explain, why is there sin? Why are we allowed to get off track? And what is the cause of this? And so that's where he's going to kind of go in these 4 articles. There are 4, so it's not going to be as long as the previous 3 days, where there were 10 articles each. And then also, there's going to be a lot of mention about the interaction between our reason, our will, and our sensitive appetites. Okay, those are 3 of the main faculties that we have. I like to emphasize this a lot because in order to know yourself, you have to know your faculties and how each of those works and how they're related to our final end. So with no further ado, let's go into Article 1, whether sin has a cause. And you would expect that to be yes, because otherwise, how would it happen, right? And he says, a sin is an inordinate act. Accordingly, insofar as it is an act, it can have a direct cause, even as any other act, but so far as it is inordinate, it has a cause in the same way as a negation or privation can have a cause. Now, this is important because remember, Thomas defines evil as a lack of good, a privation of the good, where evil doesn't really even have any being or essence in and of itself. It's just the privation of something rather than being something itself. So keep that in mind. Now, 2 causes may be assigned to a negation. In the first place, absence of the cause of affirmation. Okay, so there it is, the deprivation or the lack of what's good. The negation of the cause itself is the cause of the negation in itself, since the result of the removing of the cause is the removal of the effect. Thus, the absence of the sun is the cause of darkness. So if you have things that cause us to be good, to be virtuous, and then you remove it, well, you're going to have the lack of virtue or the absence of the good, and you're going to have evil, right, or sin. In the second place, the cause of an affirmation of which a negation is a sequel is the accidental cause of the resulting negation. Okay, accidental means it's not part of the essential nature to it, it's extra. Like my having brown hair or my being 5'8", that's not essential to my nature, it's accidental, right? Thus, fire, by causing heat in virtue of its primary tendency, consequently causes a privation of cold. The first of these suffices to cause a simple negation. But since the inordinateness of sin and of every evil is not a simple negation, but the privation of that which something ought naturally to have, such an inordinateness must needs have an accidental efficient cause. So we are by nature good. God created us good, but of course original sin and concupiscence leads us to a tendency to sin. For that which naturally is and ought to be in a thing is never lacking except on account of some impeding cause. And accordingly, we are wont to say that evil, which consists in a certain privation, has a deficient cause or an accidental efficient cause. Now, every accidental cause is reducible to the direct cause. Since then, sin on the part of its inordinateness has an accidental efficient cause, and on the part of its act, a direct efficient cause. So he's really breaking this down into the different causes: essential cause, accidental cause. It follows that the inordinateness of sin is a result of the cause of the act. Accordingly, then, the will, lacking the direction of the rule of reason and of the divine law and the intent on some mutable good, causes the act of sin directly. So the will is the main subject of sin, as we learned yesterday. And so when the will, in concert with the reason, don't apprehend or desire the ultimate good adequately, or some sensitive appetite takes over, that's when sin is going to result. And the inordinateness of the act indirectly and beside the intention, for the lack of order in the act results from the lack of direction in the will. So ultimately, it is going to be a problem in the will. The will is intellectual appetite. So when the appetite goes astray, that's when you have problems. But of course, you have to understand the relationship between the will and the reason, and also the sensitive appetites, which he's going to get at here. All right, whether sin has an internal cause, so that's inside us. Is there something in us that causes us to sin? He says the direct cause of sin must be considered on the part of the act. Now, we may distinguish a twofold internal cause of human acts. One remote, that means it's off. The other proximate, which means closer. The proximate internal cause of the human act is the reason and the will, in respect of which man has a free will, while the remote cause is the apprehension of the sensitive part and also the sensitive appetite. Okay, so we are here, we're naturally drawn to the good. We have a sensitive appetite for food and drink and sleep and sex, and we also have a will and a reason that are trying to order this. And that's where the problems come up, okay? An inordinate desire for all these good things in the world. Just as it is due to the judgment of reason that the will is moved to something in accord with reason, so it is due to an apprehension of the senses that the sensitive appetite is inclined to something, which inclination sometimes influences the will and the reason, as we shall explain further on. Accordingly, a double interior cause of sin may be assigned, one proximate on the part of the reason and will, the other remote on the part of the imagination or sensitive appetite. All right, so it's so interesting to see how we work, and also how the virtues and the gifts of the Holy Spirit and all these things that we've already talked about play into us achieving our final end. But since we have said above that the cause of sin is some apparent good as motive, yet lacking the due motive, that is, the rule of reason or the divine law, this motive, which is an apparent good, appertains to the apprehension of the senses and to the appetite, while the lack of the due rule appertains to the reason, whose nature it is to consider this rule, and the completeness of the voluntary sinful act excuse me, to the will, so that the act of the will, given the conditions we have just mentioned, is already a sin. So again, I think the thing we got to take out of this is the reason is what is our cognitive aspect. It comes to know things. The will is an intellectual appetite. So those ideas, those concepts that it's drawn to, the abstract, that's the will. The sensitive appetite is a desire for the sensitive things, the pizza, the donuts, the sex, the drink, the sleep, right? Sensitive things. All right, so Article 3, whether sin has an external cause. Okay, so those are the internal things we just talked about, the reason, the will, and the sensitive appetite. Now, the external cause. The internal cause of sin is both the will as completing the sinful act and the reason as lacking the due rule and the appetite as inclining to sin. Okay, that's what we just learned. Accordingly, something external might be a cause of sin in three ways, either by moving the will immediately, or by moving the reason, or by moving the sensitive appetite. Okay, so those three things we just mentioned, reason, will, sensitive appetite, all can have an external cause drawing us to sin. Okay, none can move the will inwardly save God alone, who cannot be a cause of sin. Hence it follows that nothing external can be a cause of sin except by moving the reason, as a man or devil by enticing to sin, or by moving the sensitive appetite as certain external sensibles move it. Yet neither does external enticement move the reason of necessity. Okay, we're not forced to sin. We're not forced to reason improperly in matters of action, nor do things proposed externally of necessity move the sensitive appetite. Okay, so we don't have that excuse. We can't say the devil made me do it. I had no control. I was, moved incontrollably. Thomas is saying we can't use that, except perhaps to be disposed thereto in a certain way, and even the sensitive appetite does not of necessity move the reason and will. Therefore, something external can be a cause moving to sin, but not so as to be a sufficient cause thereof, and the will alone is a sufficient completive cause of sin being accomplished. So again, it's not forced, but it certainly does put a lot of pressure on us to sin when we see the box of donuts or whatever the vice may be, something of a sexual nature or perversion or whatever. You know what I'm talking about. But the reason and the will do have the ability, with God's grace and with God's help, to overcome this. But there's a lot of things that go into a good moral act. Article 4, finally, whether one sin is the cause of another. He says, for as much as a sin has a cause in the part of the act of sin, it is possible for one sin to be the cause of another, in the same way as one human act is the cause of another. Hence it happens that one sin may be the cause of another in respect of 4 kinds of causes. Remember the 4 causes: efficient, final, formal, and material, right? First, after the manner of an efficient or moving cause. I love this, that he's going back to Aristotle's 4 causes, and he's applying it to sin. Aristotle's efficient or moving cause, both directly and indirectly, as that which removes an impediment, is called an indirect cause of movement. For when man, by one sinful act, loses grace or charity or shame or anything else that withdraws him from sin, he thereby falls into another sin, so that the first sin is the accidental cause of the second. Okay, so we can fall into a pattern of sin where you get drunk and then you're more likely going to commit sins of the flesh. So one sin really led to another. Directly, as when one sinful act, man is disposed to commit more readily another like act, because acts cause dispositions and habits inclining to these acts. All right, so sin does tend to compound. It's like a ball, like an avalanche. It just grows and grows. Secondly, after the manner of material cause, one sin is the cause of another by preparing its matter. Thus, covetousness prepares the matter for strife, which often is about the wealth a man has amassed together. Thirdly, after the manner of a final cause. Remember, final cause is purpose, reason. One sin causes another insofar as a man commits one sin for the sake of another, which is his end. As when a man is guilty of simony for the end of ambition, or fornication for the purpose of theft, or somebody may be gluttonous or addicted to drugs, and they go and steal, or they've got to feed this addiction, or alcohol, or what have you. And since the end gives the form to moral matters, it follows that one sin is the formal cause of another, because in the act of fornication committed for the purpose of theft, the former is material while the latter is formal. So I hope this makes sense. It's really interesting. Thomas is tying it all together, and that's why I've said so many times, you got to understand form and matter and essence and accident and all these different things that go into the things that we experience in the world, ourselves, because it all starts tying together. It even applies to sin. Thanks for joining me. That will do it for question 25, the causes of sin, as we continue through the treatise on evil habits. God bless you.